Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone around the world that is participating in this session. Welcome to the 6th High-Level Policy Session of WSIS Forum 2020. My name is Denise Salas. I am from Swiss Engineering Geneva chapter. I am very glad to be moderating this session today. I would like to thank WSIS team and ITU for giving us this platform to engage with WSIS community and for the effort they have put into organizing the new format of WSIS Forum 2020. The topic that we will be discussing today is inclusiveness, access to information, and knowledge for all. Nowadays, access to the internet is a basic service for all people. However, statistics show that there is a huge gap between the developed and developing world, which need to be addressed. According with ITU statistics, 53% of the population in the world is using internet. It's clear for all of us that sharing and strengthening of global knowledge for development can be enhanced by removing barriers to equitable access to information for economic, social, political, health, cultural, educational, and scientific activities, and by facilitating access to public domain information, including by universal design and the use of assistive technologies. I would like to welcome our distinguished guest today, with whom we will discuss this topic. The panelists represent public and private sector, international organizations, academia, technical community, and civil society. Each panelist will have 5 minutes to respond to a specific question that I will be asking them. And at the end, we will have a Q&A session where the public or attendees can submit their question using the option Q&A in the Zoom application. If you wish to direct your question to a specific speaker, please to mention, or if you would like to have that question to be answered by any of the speakers that we have on board, please let us know. I would like to add that human caption is available in your screen. Let me introduce our first panelist. He's the WSIS Action Lines facilitator for this session. He's the Director of Strategy and Policy, Communication and Information Sector from UNESCO. I have 3 questions for you, Mr. Berger. I will read the question. I will give you the floor to answer the questions. Mr. Berger, from UNESCO point of view, what has the COVID-19 crisis taught us about the clash between information and knowledge on one hand, and disinformation and misinformation on the other? The second and third questions are, why should linguistic diversity be taken into account when communicating health information to the public? How have countries taken up this challenge in times of COVID-19? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. So let me respond to those questions by saying some broader points, and to contextualize, of course, under the WSIS, we are looking at action lines, particularly about access to information and knowledge, and the role of technology, particularly digital technology, in that regard. And this links up very much, of course, with the Sustainable Development Agenda. And I hope that people will know that in goal 16, there is a target, number 10, which is public access to information and fundamental freedoms. So public access to information and fundamental freedoms. This is seen as part of the development aspiration, but also, as everybody here I'm sure can readily see, the more you have public access to information and fundamental freedoms, the more you can advance sustainable development in other areas, including health and including in the COVID crisis. So at UNESCO, we start from this point of view in looking at all these issues, and in particular, we do take seriously that access to information is part of the right to seek and receive information under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And this is an important point that I'll come back to in a minute. But that's the starting point, because if there's no rights, then on what basis can people actually access information? Second of all, I would say UNESCO is very sensitive to the question of gender equality. It's a priority for UNESCO. And also we have a priority, Africa, because of the importance of giving attention to the development of the continent of Africa. And then thirdly, we also are concerned with the big picture of internet and digital technology. And we have a position agreed by all our member states, 193 member states, called Internet Universality. And this is to propose that the internet should be for everybody, everywhere. And to have this, it should be respecting rights. It should be open, it should be accessible, and it should be governed by multi-stakeholder participation. So that is what we call ROAM, R-O-A-M, rights, openness, accessibility, multi-stakeholder. And we're busy mapping many countries around the world as to what they can do to improve internet universality. So all this is part of the context about now coming to the question of COVID and disinformation and misinformation and what it means for the information society. I think it's clear to say that today we face a problem not just of increasing information and knowledge to all in an empty space, but first of all having to dislodge and debunk falsehoods that are occupying that space. So it's not just a matter of filling a gap, it's of cleaning up the mess that exists there. This is a mess that is of deliberately created disinformation and also innocently created misinformation. Now, of course, when we're speaking about the information society, we don't want to speak about the disinformation and the misinformation. In fact, from the point of view of UNESCO, information is an antidote to disinformation and misinformation. And so what we're concerned about is how does the world increase the supply of information, particularly reliable information, and decrease what's happening in the disinformation and the misinformation space. Now, in this particular contestation, it's very important that the efforts to oppose and counter and eliminate the disinformation and the misinformation are not inadvertently attacking information. And why this is a difficult situation is that between information, which we would say is normally speaking, information that is accepted as it's informative, and the falsehoods, there's a lot of stuff in the middle, which in science and in policy, it's not clear yet whether it's true. Only time will tell whether this becomes true. So we need to really combat the proven falsehoods on the one side. We need to elevate the proven truths on the other side. But in the middle, we need to make sure that that is not taken as true or taken as false, because it's in contestation. And if we're going to move ahead, we have to really understand what we know, what we don't know, and what we know to be wrong. So that's, I think, very important for us in taking this discussion forward. Now, following on from this point that I said that for UNESCO, access to information is based on a fundamental human right. This has seen some progress. Last year, we published a little booklet. I'll just show it over here. I hope you can see this. It's not showing that well. Anyway,
yes, it's not. We can see very well the book.
I'll post a link. And by the way, I will post a link to recent useful studies that we did on the question of disinformation policy briefs, because this is a complicated issue. And I think you may be interested to see what, I just have to put this in the chat here, all panelists and attendees. Just give me 1 second here. So here I put in the link to the UNESCO work on disinformation.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay.
We can share also the link in the page, in the website of WSIS
Thank you
Forum
very much.
2020, in order that all attendees and all the people can have access to this information.
Thank you. Well, just to wrap up, I think I have 2 or 3 more minutes left.
Yes.
So very quickly, the right to information, we now have 126 countries recorded by UNESCO that have a law, a guarantee for their citizens to access information. This is very important. Still, 126 countries is not the world's countries. So we need political progress there if we're going to really have access to information. Second, I'll move on to the three key areas that I think are of concern to UNESCO in terms of this action line. The first is the level of development. The second one is the language diversity question. And the third is the disability question. And these are all relevant to COVID, as I'll tell you also. So first of all, development level. You know, I think COVID has really shown us the importance of having universal knowledge. Some people here may know recently the small country of Rwanda, which has a history of terrible genocide, as you know, recently came up with a very cost-effective algorithm for doing COVID tests. Now, this is a country that's a developing country. Normally, countries like this are looking to the developed countries for the access to knowledge. But here you have an example of how useful it is for everybody, developed and not developed countries, to access the knowledge that's produced in Rwanda about cost-effective algorithms to do COVID tests. What this shows is that we need to have international cooperation, open solutions, open science, because only in that way can we begin to bridge the gap between the developed and the underdeveloped. And the point is that it's not just that the developed have knowledge and information and the underdeveloped or the developing do not. We all, particularly at this point in time, need to share. That's point number one. Point number two, language. Of course, knowledge and information are inextricably bound up with the question of language. Of course, and with this action line C8 concerns cultural diversity and identity, which of course is part of language as well. And people may know that UNESCO member states have got the only instrument in the UN system, which is called a recommendation for promoting the use of multilingualism and universal access to cyberspace. And I'd encourage those governmental people involved to look at this recommendation and to report what your countries are doing in this regard, because it's really important to share these good practices. Second, of course, I would like to just remind people that last year was the International Year for Indigenous Languages, and UNESCO was the lead in the UN system there. And that has led to the decade of international decade for indigenous languages starting next year. So it's really important for every country that has such multiple languages, which is almost every country, to pay attention to this decade, because this gives us a lot of opportunity, especially to look at using technology and developing business models for small languages, because it's fine to have automated translation and AI for the big languages. But if we don't pay attention to solutions to small languages, we are losing out that area of knowledge, information, and empowerment. And just finally, on the language question, this year UNESCO will launch the World Atlas on Languages, so please look out for that. And the last area I want to address very quickly is disabilities. Disabilities are super important, of course, because disabled people can be disproportionately affected by everything in the world, including COVID, including complications in recovering from COVID in many cases. Now, the importance of giving or supporting access to information and knowledge for disabled people really becomes something that should concern us all. And here I would like to signal that UNESCO has got a very nice website called Story for Development, and I'll paste the link again, Story for Development. The story is being told directly, and if you want information and knowledge about what it's like to be disabled, but to succeed, I commend that website to you. So that's a way in which, one of the many ways in which technology can be used to have inclusive involvement for disabled people. So to wrap up, I focus on the right to information. I've looked at the questions of sharing for open science, open solutions for global development. I've looked at language, I've looked at disability. Let me finish then by saying that if we can pay attention to these kinds of issues, we can not just build information societies and tackle COVID, but I think that we can move forward towards what UNESCO likes to call knowledge societies. And knowledge societies for UNESCO is, in a way, how do we optimize the information society, particularly through ensuring that there's freedom of expression, access to information, respect for linguistic and cultural diversity, and quality information for all. So thank you very much for letting me make those remarks. I hope I answered your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Berger. It's such a pleasure to have you in the panel, and thank you for your work in UNESCO. Our second panelist is Her Excellency Adriana Antanasova, Deputy Minister of Transport, Information Technology and Communication of the Republic of Bulgaria. Welcome, Her Excellency.
Hello. Thank you, dear Mrs. Salas, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Hello from Bulgaria. It's a pleasure to me to take part in this panel dedicated to the inclusiveness. I would like to share with you the Bulgarian views on these issues. Internet usage has kept growing over the last 15 years to reach a level of connectivity that is transforming almost every sector of economy and accelerating social and economic advancement. The COVID pandemic shines a spotlight of the vital importance of digital technology and services, but also spotlight digital disparities. 3.6 billion people worldwide still have no connectivity at all. These people have been deprived of the digital lifeline that has been instrumental in keeping economics and societies going during this crisis. In a world that has never been so dependent of the power of digital technology, we must redouble our efforts to make sure that all people, regardless of gender, ability, availability, age, and location, enjoy equal access to digital platforms and services. The importance of universal broadband access to enable essential services and social cohesion must bring a new urgency to eradicating the digital divide globally and promoting digital inclusion. We have to ensure that the digital infrastructure, services, and applications fundamental in this crisis are accessible to all, and that everyone's rights to communicate and be part of digital world is fulfilled. The aim of developed and deployed communication technology that are born accessible is a key pillar for European Commission Accessibility Act. But the pandemic has highlighted the need of multi-stakeholders collaborative efforts to plug some gaps. Bulgaria, as a EU member country, has taken various measures to prevent the consequences of the digital divides. We have a national strategic document called Digital Transformation of Bulgaria for the period 2020-2030. It takes into account the United Nations Sustainable Development Objectives and the use of digital technologies to achieve them. The goal and priorities included in the document are in strategic areas such as digital infrastructure, cybersecurity, R&D, education, transport, economy, healthcare, and digital governance. Bulgaria can build on the strengths in advanced digital technology to take advantage of the opportunities offered by the 5G networks, IoT, big data, robotics, blockchain, 3D printing, and artificial intelligence. Education and training are identified as key areas of intervention. Our ministry is currently working on the update of the National Broadband Infrastructure Plan for Next Generation Access, focused on the deployment of high-speed network in rural areas, efficient provision of radio spectrum for wireless broadband and 5G, and accelerated development and use of broadband services. The COVID-19 pandemic has slowed down some of the spectrum delivery process for 5G, but we expect by the end of this year to have our procedure for granting rights of use of the frequency band, pioneer bands that will be used for 5G networks. Currently in Bulgaria, the mobile broadband internet access take-up reaches 103 subscription per 100 people, which is above the EU average. We also have lower than EU average prices for broadband access. The national program Digital Bulgaria 2025 identified measures to improve competitiveness in the field of ICT and increase a number of qualified ICT professionals. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted an already set priority for ensuring a stronger and more sustainable digital transformation. The use of advanced digital technology will increase productivity, improve the efficiency, and open up new opportunity for businesses and all sectors. And that is valid not only for Bulgaria, but for every country in the world. Therefore, we support the multi-stakeholder model in the ICT policy development in order to utilize the existing potential in the best way. And ITU activities and WISIS forums in particular provide the right opportunity for much needed wide-scale international cooperation in this area. Thank you for this listening to me, and I am staying for further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you very much for your intervention, and thank you for sharing with us what is being done and what will be done in Bulgaria in order to accomplish the Sustainable Development Goals. Our third panelist is His Excellency, Mr. Vice Minister of the Ministry of Digital Economy and Society of Thailand. Good afternoon, His Excellency. The question for you is, what are Thailand policies on information and knowledge access during the COVID-19 pandemic? Hello?
Excellency,
Yes?
distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to say it's my great honor to attend this online session of WISIS 2020. And I would like to thank ITU for making today's event possible during this worldwide health crisis. Before I respond to your question, let me begin with the last successful year. Thailand was immensely appreciative of being recognized as a winner of the WISIS Prize 2019 in the category of Information and Communication Infrastructure. For our village broadband internet projects, or Net Pacharat, this project aims to reduce inequality of internet access and provide greater opportunities for all, particularly for the rural people across the country. Currently, 24,700 villages have already been provided with the fiber optics network. The number of Net Pacharat registered users up until now amounts to nearly 8.5 million, an increase on average 200,000 users per month. These successful projects keep expanding and lead to another initiative called Digital Volunteer. We form a volunteer network, recruit locally, to help and teach people in the community on how to harness digital technology in the most effective and efficient way, such as learning about credibility of information and knowledge, suggesting basic data analytics, and raise awareness of online threats. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, during the COVID-19 situation, Thailand is aware of the importance of access to information and knowledge to ensure accountability as well as to develop implementation of government's policy on solving the crisis. First priority, we shall ensure the accessibility of internet. It proves that the internet service should be important like a public basic utility, especially in a world crisis that we are facing today. The Royal Thai government collaborates with the internet service provider, ensuring that the internet is readily available and accessible during the pandemic. For example, high quality internet with the speed up to 1 gigabyte was provided for medical personnel to able to access information via internet, and to connect CCTV system for patient monitoring to minimize direct contact with patient. Second, the affordability for all is one among the other policies. The ministry worked with the Thai regulator and service providers to lessen the burden on people who now have to work from home by providing extra 10 gigabytes of data on mobile phone users and offering 100 minutes of voice call for 45 days with free of charge. For the government sector, we also provide unlimited free access data to video conferencing and e-meeting tools. Third, to ensure that people get the accurate information from reliable sources. The Anti-Fake News Center of Thailand has been set up for primarily monitor and inspect information published on social media, as well as to analyze and identify fake news. All the collect data related to COVID-19 is reported daily to the Government Center of COVID-19 Situation Administration. Lastly, the word all is more important policy. We could not have done this without the support and strong cooperation from all stakeholders, including government, private sector, medical staff, and the Thai people. Today, COVID-19 in Thailand is under control, and I'm very glad to say that 0 new domestic cases declared since the 4th of May. However, we must not let down our guard and continue actively fight against it by leveraging digital technologies. Thailand stands the commitment to work with the ITU members and ITU, providing access to information, sharing knowledge and best practice, and always putting our best effort to achieve the SDGs, as well as to uplift the standard of living of our people. In closing, I wish you all the best, and we shall overcome this together, and hope that everyone will stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency, for your intervention and for sharing with us all the initiatives that your government put in place in your country. Our next panelist is the Chief Executive Officer of Lesotho Communication Authority. Good afternoon, Ms. Matela. The question for you is, what is the role of a sound legislative framework in balancing the right of access to information and the right to privacy in the fourth industrial revolution? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Denise, and greetings to everyone on the forum. The subject that we are dealing with at the moment is sound legislative framework, or the role of a sound legislative framework in balancing the right of access to information, as well as the right to privacy in the fourth industrial revolution. What we've picked up in Lesotho is that it's quite important, particularly when you're dealing with constitutional rights, to ensure that the legal framework is very clear and very concise and relevant and accurate, and that the mechanisms that are put in place are the type that can be trusted by our constituents, being our citizens, to encourage the take-up of ICTs as a mechanism to utilize in terms of even managing situations such as COVID-19 pandemic. Now, what you'll find is that in the absence of a clear and concise legal framework, we are constantly trying to find mechanisms through which we are always chasing after technological development or chasing after incidents that as they arise. But when you have a sound legal framework of balancing those rights, you find that it becomes easier for citizens to take up these mechanisms or these measures that are designed to ensure access to information. The other key factor as well is that as information becomes available and people, you start utilizing the internet at a higher rate, you'll find that it's important to ensure that the information that they find on the internet is actually accurate. In particular, in situations such as this one where we are dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, you find that some of the information might not necessarily be accurate, but you find that people take that information and that can actually have an impact to the right to life. This has an impact in the sense that when information is given on the internet or access is given to information, and people are not sure of the accuracy of that information, and the information perhaps says to them, don't take a vaccine when it comes along, where would we be in the world if the vaccine for polio had not been availed to people and people were given misinformation about the efficacy of the measures that were taken to save lives? So even in this instance, although we understand the importance of the right to access to information, we need to make sure that those platforms, as they are being put in place, and the legal framework that supports them is actually secure, so that people can trust those mechanisms, and so that we are able to measure the level of consumer protection. Now, the other key aspect as well from a regulatory perspective is to ensure that we have technology-based monitoring and oversight of compliance with data protection, both from an internet access perspective, as well as activities or items that are posted on the internet. Based on the fast changes that are taking place in technology and the urgency that we are now experiencing, obviously, some of the SDGs that we are talking about, which we understand the communication sector to underpin, we have found that our legislative provisions do not necessarily cater for that. And there's an urgency based on the current pandemic, that makes it very critical for us to have a legal basis through which we engage with our citizens. And Lesotho is in the process of developing all of those legislative provisions to ensure that our citizens have access to information, not only information that is accurate, particularly in relation to health issues, in relation to e-education. Some of the key interventions that we've had in Lesotho through our legislative provisions and the multi-stakeholder processes that we have adopted is to ensure that we grant zero-rated access in terms of tariff approvals as a regulator, to ensure that a website such as that of the WHO or even access to websites of the government relating to information and the provision of toll-free numbers to our command center have been provided to ensure that people are actually able to access that information, and to ensure that all of our citizens have access to that without necessarily incurring the cost, just to ensure that we support the plight towards saving lives. So the other key aspect as well is that even these ICTs are quite difficult to access in terms of from a cost perspective, because they are competing resources in terms of implementing the legal frameworks. And that is the rationale behind why there might be some difficulty in countries adopting or implementing the legislative provisions once they are in place. But most certainly in Lesotho, we are flexible in the way in which we have adopted or at least put in place legal provisions which assist us to amend and to accommodate changes as they take place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matela, for your intervention. You're right. Regulation is a must in order to assure access to information and protect the citizens and ensure quality and accurate information for all the population. Thank you very much. Our next panelist is Mr. Chairman of the Board of Directors of ANACOM Portugal. Welcome, Mr. Chairman. The question for you is, when we speak of inclusiveness and access to information, what first comes to mind is access to modern communication means, and in particular to the internet. But other forms of access to information are also very relevant in some situations. That is the case of access to the basic broadcasting television service by people that are not able or willing to use the internet, be it for absence of material means such as equipment and infrastructure, but mostly for lack of digital literacy. I hear that ANACOM has been involved in quiet and interesting projects related to giving access to information for disadvantaged population groups in the context of your digital terrestrial television migration. Can you share your experience with us? The floor is yours, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to be participating in this forum. I would like to send our kind regards to all the participants and to the other panelists. Also, congratulations to the organizers. Indeed, the access to information and knowledge, it's one of the goals of our activity. And so we try to combine all the possible ways to achieve good communications to all the population in my country. So telecommunications and internet access is one of the priorities, but at the first time, there are some regions where the students cannot have access and the population cannot have access to the internet. And so for this, it's important the broadcast television service. And in this context, during this year, because of the preparation of the 5G, we have to move the transmission of the digital terrestrial television to a new band. And so this migration requires our authority several actions to guarantee all the population is able to access the broadcasting television service, namely the students to follow the school lessons during this pandemic crisis. And so here our action was not only to create a call center to help the population to solve the problems during the migration, but also to have our own staff dedicated to help the population in this process. And so when required, when we receive a call from some family, we go to the respective house trying to solve the difficulties of connections, and this was really working well. So the experience we have in this domain and what I'd like to share with you is that also in my country, mainly in the rural areas where the access to internet has not good conditions, is important to maintain this broadcasting television service, and namely for the students, for the young population during the pandemic crisis, it was really important to continue to have the contacts with the schools through this television service dedicated to the transmission of the lessons from the professors. And so we will continue this process during the next months, and we hope that this will be a good service guaranteeing the access to information and knowledge by all the population. I will be happy to share and to answer any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing with us this amazing project, enable a student continue with the school during this pandemic. Thank you very much. Our next panelist is Ambassador and is the permanent observer of the International Chamber of Commerce to the United Nations office at Geneva. Welcome, Mr. Conroy. The question for you is, what is the role of the private sector in creating inclusive information and knowledge societies for all? The floor is yours. Mr. Conroy?
Thank you very much, Denise. My bandwidth is very low in my computer, so please let me know if you have any problems hearing me.
Yeah, of course.
First, I'd like to say how pleased I am to be participating again this year in WSIS as a panelist, so thank you for the invitation. And also congratulations to you all for organizing WSIS 2020 in this virtual environment. The International Chamber of Commerce and its global network of 45 million businesses in over 100 countries is committed to playing a leading role in increasing meaningful digital connectivity and inclusion as a part of our commitment to the implementation of the SDGs, as Guy mentioned in his introduction. ICC's mission is to make business work for everyone, every day, everywhere. And we cannot fulfill that mission if businesses, whether they be small, medium, and large, wherever they are, and their workers and those workers' communities are not connected, able to reach services, and do not have access to the latest technologies. We believe that meaningful and inclusive connectivity encompasses broadband adoption that is not just available, accessible, and affordable, but also safe and trusted, empowering users, and having a positive impact on their lives. We recognize that non-technology and non-economic issues play a central role in whether people are able to participate online, such as the lack of digital skills, linguistic and literacy barriers, and social norms and cultural attitudes, and Guy mentions others in his presentation. The COVID-19 crisis has also exposed and exacerbated gaps between those who have access to digital technologies and the opportunities that these technologies can bring, and those who do not. The truth is that often those without access, including, for example, women and girls, migrants, refugees and displaced persons, citizens of rural and remote communities, are the very people who would benefit most in relative terms from the gains in development that digitalization can bring. Today, 3.6 billion people at least are still without access to high-speed internet. Business recognizes the absolute imperative in both moral and economic terms to play a leading role in enabling an inclusive digital future. As we are looking to rebuild with greater resilience from the pandemic, achieving meaningful and universal connectivity will be a vital component of any post-COVID recovery. Business has a key role to play in helping to bridge the connectivity and adoption gap and to address digital skills and capacity building. This is crucial, clearly, because digital adoption can boost sustainable development and economic growth. Businesses do invest in infrastructure and will continue to do so, and this investment is significant. In 2016, the Broadband Commission estimated that connecting a further 1.5 billion people by 2020 would require US $450 billion in high-level infrastructure investment. In addition, significant investment is needed in capacity building programs that increase digital literacy and skills. Before the COVID-19 crisis, this rapid shift to digitalization was evident. The pandemic has increased this momentum. One of ICC's responses has been to launch a project for collaborative action to assist SMEs, which have been disproportionately affected by the crisis. This campaign, Save Our SMEs, which you can find on our website, or SOS, contains a number of tools and training for SMEs around digitalization. However, businesses alone cannot meet all these investment needs. In order to continue and upscale business investment, it is important that policymakers understand the means by which the private sector makes investment decisions, as well as how political and regulatory decisions impact the technical functioning of the infrastructure or service. In this context, it is vital that we get the fundamentals right from a public policy and ecosystems perspective. We need to reduce barriers to digital transformation and unlock the development gains, most fundamentally by creating a stable and enabling policy and regulatory environment that facilitates innovation, welcomes new entrants into our digital ecosystems, and values new forms of competition. And it is imperative that we maintain open markets and ensure free flow of data across borders. Digital innovations can be crippled without the fluid movement of information between countries. And while privacy and security concerns are legitimate, they should not be used arbitrarily to restrict trade and innovation. An inclusive digital transformation will also require an all-encompassing, whole-of-government approach to policymaking. The deployment of digital technologies can, of course, raise a wide range of economic, technical, and social cultural questions, many of which are rightly contained in the Secretary-General's roadmap. The intrinsically global nature of the internet and digitally enabled services also requires an unprecedented degree of international cooperation in policymaking. For example, fragmented national laws and regulations all too often inhibit the ability of entrepreneurs to leverage the internet to trade internationally. In this context, and I'm very close to finishing, we strongly encourage governments to expedite the conclusion of a new global framework of rules governing e-commerce under the auspices of the World Trade Organization. This would be a significant outcome for SMEs in all countries. Multi-stakeholder partnerships between businesses, governments, and the technical community and civil society are crucial if we're to strengthen global digital cooperation. Levering our expertise in the private sector will be essential in making informed policy choices. Indeed, the very nature of the global internet requires an effective multi-stakeholder governance model to be at its core. I'm very pleased then, as I said before, to engage again in WSIS this year. It's an important part of our efforts to support a more inclusive and independent digital world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, His Excellency, for sharing with us all the activities that are you promoting in your organization to help all the businesses around the world. Thank you very much. Our next panelist is the Chief Executive Officer of Bangladesh NGO Network for Radio and Communication. Welcome, and the question for you is, what is the role of community radio broadcasting in COVID-19 crisis in Bangladesh? Please, the floor is yours.
Madam Moderator, Excellencies, distinguished member of the panel, all participants around the world, very good morning, very good afternoon, and as well as very good evening. It is my great pleasure to be here as member of the panel to share with role of community radio in COVID process, and as well as today's session, inclusiveness, access to information and knowledge for all. I have a 2-3 slide. So now I would like to share with you regarding my slide. Okay. Basically, in Bangladesh, we address the COVID situation from March 1, 2020. And first of all, we have already set up 3 objectives during the COVID time. Number 1 objective is animate civil society organization, government, health service providers, and communities for reinforcing collective action regarding COVID matter. Number 2, keeping community people's daily life normal and livelihood function. So our all sorts of content, broadcasting content in line with the daily life normal and livelihood related. And third objective was mobilize further cooperation among government, civil society organization, local market, and communities response. So this was basically our objective during that time. Then after 3 months, Bangladesh government has declared the adaptation policy of the COVID-19. So I would like to share something regarding this, challenges of the community radio broadcasting during the COVID time. Only 2-3 points. Basically, the rapid social distancing and quarantine or isolation have been caused massive pressure on community radio broadcasting in Bangladesh. Fundraising process have been cancelled and revenue such as advertising income are drying up overnight, resulting in immediate cash flow basically hamper. And last one is many community radio stations have few or no cash reserve and tied them over the situation like this. This was the challenge. So now I would like to share you regarding the relevance of the community media in the age of digitalization of the digital media. Community radio station as one of the source of information, helping to raise awareness of the community, reinforcing behavioral change among the CSO, government, health official, and locally elected bodies. Community radio stations are build awareness to community people at different point, and the community radio station as a platform of those different kind of communities, say like Dalits communities, transgender communities, disadvantaged communities like this. Yeah. Now I'd like to share with you regarding the and community radio station are broadcasting program on COVID-19 in local language. So this is one of the uniqueness of the program, and community radio station are producing content which speak directly to the localized issue and concerns and features of the trusted local people in a way that nationally or regionally produced content cannot. Community radio station have utilized Facebook, YouTube, and all sorts of social media and also utilizing mobile journalism for live broadcasting. And most of the listeners have been listening the community radio through of their mobile set now. After that, when government declared the adaptation policy in Bangladesh from 1st June, we have declared the 4 strategy for future. This is called COVID adaptation process. Number 1 objective is enhance the capabilities of the affected communities through an equity lens for coping, surviving with the new normal situation. So we emphasize the equity lens. Equity lens, that means look after the gender situation, look after the transgender situation, and look after the voices for the voiceless, voices to be heard like this. Second objective is focus on enhanced capabilities of the broadcasters and stakeholders for exercising a new normal and building resilience. And the third objective is very interesting, accelerate of ICT application for benefiting community people in all aspects of life, like e-education, e-health, e-business, e-enterprise like this. And last one is, yes, I will finish. Last one is effective access to information and communication technology and media for countering infodemic and for keeping lives and livelihood easy, providing reliable information. Thank you, madam, for your nice time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rahman, for sharing with us all the initiatives that you your NGOs are doing in order to sensibilize the population in Bangladesh.
This is the grassroots voice. Grassroots voice.
Thank you. Our final panelist for this session is Mr. Leblois. He is the president of Global Initiative for Inclusive ICTs, known as G3 ICT. Please, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Denise, and Thank you for the invitation this morning and this afternoon. I wanted this morning to cover the specific issue related to persons with disabilities. As our topic is inclusiveness and access to information and knowledge for all, it's really important to remember that worldwide there are about 1 billion persons with disabilities, according to WHO and the World Bank. 2/3 of those 1 billion persons live with severe disabilities. That means probably 650 million folks just cannot access digital interfaces as well as other persons unless there is accommodation provided. And so what does that mean? I mean, most often people see disability as a very marginal issue. In fact, most disabilities are invisible. So you will not think about those disabilities. They include persons with hearing loss, deaf, blind, with vision loss, but also a number of different types of cognitive disabilities and age-related disabilities, not to mention, of course, physical and dexterity issues for many people. And that can affect access to information in many ways. It could affect the way you actually perceive the information, the way you understand the information, or the way you can interact with the information. And in all those three phases of your digital life, you may have significant barriers that put you at risk of not being able to participate fully in what's happening in the digital world. So what we do at Disabilities since 2006, when the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was launched, is to promote the disposition of the Convention on ICT accessibility. And so to do that, of course, we partner with organizations like ITU or others to promote policy frameworks and legal frameworks that are indispensable for the application of digital accessibility policies and programs in countries. So in order to really understand what's going on, we manage an index with Disabled People International called the DARE Index, Digital Accessibility Right Evaluation Index. This is a survey that covers today 137 countries that represent about 90% of the population. So it gives you a good idea as to what's going on in the country. And in virtually all places, our researchers, our panelists are persons with disabilities in organizations that are advocates. So what can we see from that research? I will concentrate this afternoon on three domains which have been mentioned many times during this session. Number one, television. 39% of countries around the world have zero policy for accessibility of television. And 7% who have actually policies actually do not do anything about it. That's 46%. So close to half of the countries have no policy for accessible television. It means they don't care about persons with disabilities in their population. On the website situation, 42% of countries have no policy for website accessibility, and 4% do nothing about it. That's 46%, almost as much as for television. And when it comes to e-governance and smart cities accessibility, 50% of countries have no policy, and 4% do nothing about it if they have one. So that's 54%. And among those countries who do implement, the level of implementation remains very weak. So what's happening? Because at the same time, you can see that from a policy and legal framework, progress has been considerable. So for instance, nowadays you see about 90% of the countries have a general law that protects the rights of persons with disabilities. And in fact, thanks to the ITU lobbying governments and our own partnership with ITU, 59% of governments now have a legal definition of accessibility that includes ICTs. So the obligation is recognized. It's there in legislative frameworks in the majority of countries, but it's not happening. So we did a lot of analysis and regression analysis and also anecdotal evidence collected in different countries to see what were the key success factors that were not present that caused that gap between commitments and actual results in country. And the major issues that we see are the following. Number one, only 39% of countries have any kind of entity in government in general dedicated to ICT accessibility or with the knowledge of ICT accessibility. It means that in 61% of countries, there is nobody in government that can really direct an effort to coordinate digital accessibility policies for persons with disabilities. That's a major gap. The second issue, which is extremely important, is that only 26% of countries involve persons with disabilities in policy making and monitoring about digital accessibility. Now, if you don't ask persons with disability what should be done to actually meet their needs, there is no way you can actually have an effective policy or effective legislation or regulation. You need to have the stakeholders involved. You need to have persons with disabilities deeply involved in that policy making process. And then another aspect is there is very good progress in a way to adopt international accessibility standard. But it's only 44% of countries nowadays that have any kind of reference to international accessibility standard. But if you don't have a standard as a reference, you really can't have a policy and you can't really measure what's going on. So there again, paying attention to accessibility standards and digital accessibility standards is critical to ensure that everyone has access to information among persons with disabilities. And then finally, I would say training and capacity building is, of course, a source of lag. This is something we address with the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, one of our divisions, where we try to train and certify professionals in digital accessibility worldwide. So we currently have 62 countries where IAP members are operating, and it's progressing very fast. But still, I think the remaining effort is considerable. But what I want to say in conclusion is there is not one digital type of interface that does not have accessibility solutions today. And because those solutions exist, they ought to be implemented if anyone really wants to have universal access to information. And not paying attention to it excludes systematically about 10% of the world population from essential services and essential information. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leblois, for your intervention. And due to restriction in time, we are not going to have the session of Q&A. And I would like to thank to our panelists for sharing your experience, projects, and initiative with us. The effort, work, and commitment of the government, civil society, private, and public sector will help us to reduce or eliminate accessibility barriers in order to create an inclusive society where the citizens of the world will have access to reliable information and knowledge. Thank you very much, distinguished panelists. We are going to pass now a video. Please, the video where we are going to present all our partners. Thank you very much. The final summary will be provided soon and will be part of the outcomes of the high-level policy sessions and conclusion of high-level track by the chairman of WSIS 2020. And will also be presented orally during the final week. The recording of the high-level policy session will be made available on the WSIS Forum 2020 website after the session. I would like to invite you to the next session. The title is Digital Economy and Trade, Financing for Development and Role of ICT. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry, but the time was very short for us, and we couldn't have the session of Q&A.